Today on the show, why Indiana is the biggest threat to Ohio State and why that is bad for the rest of college football.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I am your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, the number one sports podcast network out there. Jacob Goins of Locked On Hoosiers is here. Talk about USC's playoff hopes that are not getting talked about enough. Washington blew their opportunity, and the G5 playoff race. I caused a stir yesterday. South Florida fans are furious with me today. I will explain on today's show, which is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the FanDuel app today. Jacob, Indiana is number 2 in the playoff rankings. They'll stay there. They're number 2 in my rankings. And are they truly the biggest threat to Ohio State? And then I'll explain why that might not be great news.
In the entire football landscape in college right now, yes, Indiana is the biggest threat to Ohio State. Now, I understand that Saturday against Penn State was not good. It was not a good performance. And there is a huge argument to say that Penn State deserved to win the game more than Indiana did. And I will hear that and I will wear that. But the way that Indiana responded, the way that Indiana fought, the way that Indiana found a way to win again shows me that they still have what it takes to compete for a Big Ten championship and for a national championship. But if you play like that, then you won't even make it past the first round or your first game of the college football playoff. But we know what Indiana can be at their best. It's the games against Oregon. It's the games against Illinois. It's those matchups and those performances that still give me hope and tell me that, yes, Indiana is absolutely the biggest threat to Ohio State because, look, I'm not a believer in Texas A&M. I think they're good. I think their schedule has been to me. I think if you start to dive a little deeper into that, it's not as good as we think it is. And then behind there, I don't know. I don't trust a team like Alabama or Georgia, Oregon. My goodness. I mean, thank God they won that game. I don't trust a lot of the teams back behind the Hoosiers. And so, yeah, I say by default, yes, Indiana's the biggest threat to the Buckeyes.
Here's why I don't think that's a great thing for college football. I agree with you that Indiana is the biggest threat. What I think is fair to say about the Hoosiers with the way they've played this year, the Oregon win, of course, their best win of the season. That continues to look that way after Oregon squeaked it out against a good Iowa team on the road. But in that game, tied late in the fourth quarter, Illinois is a solid team. Illinois is not a great. They might end up in the top 25 by season's end if they go 9-3, but they're not going to be near the college football playoff. I think Indiana at the upper limit is indeed as good as Ohio State. But their floor goes to a level that could make a game against Ohio State not go anywhere close to something Indiana fans would want to see.
Yeah.
And more, we're seeing at this point in the season, Jacob, that I think Ohio State's separating from everybody else. What is Ohio State's worst performance of the year? Probably Texas, right?
Yeah, Texas.
Texas, who's currently ranked inside the top 20, has figured some things out. But since that game, Ohio State has done nothing but take steps forward more and more. And they keep raising their floor and they keep raising their ceiling. And we'll see if they can finally get over that Michigan hurdle when we get to rivalry week. But for Ohio State right now, I think they're clearly the best team in college football. And it is a matter of who's going to be able to knock them off. I think there's more than one team that come into my head. It's not just Indiana. I do think Texas A&M is good with a really good football coach. I like Alabama. I'm not in love with Alabama. I don't think they're as complete as some of the other teams that are at the top. But I just keep watching the Buckeyes week after week and go, man, you're not just going to need a good performance from any of these teams below them to beat Ohio State. You're going to need a great performance, and anything other than that, Ohio State looks like they're running towards a repeat national championship.
And that's what you expect, right? That's what Ohio State is. That's what Ohio State does. And it's the fact that they're deeper than everybody and they're better than everybody. And you're seeing a really good coaching performance out of Ryan Day and the guys on that staff. There's a reason.
I was just going to say that.
There's a reason Brian Hartline is circulating for big-time P4 jobs right now. It's because he's one of the best dudes in the country. He's one of the best coaches that exists. And so
Penn State.
Yeah, you don't think SEC? You think Penn State? Okay.
If I were Penn State, I would go after Brian Hartline.
Yeah, absolutely. I would too. I've said that about Florida and Auburn. They should both call Brian Hartline, but he may not pick up the phone for those schools. But anyway, that's what you're seeing with Ohio State is even in those games where, okay, Texas wasn't a good performance, but they still won. Washington wasn't a great performance, but they handled that game from start to finish. Scoreboard doesn't look good, but the game itself did.
They only won that game by 18 points.
Yeah, exactly.
On the road.
Look at the Penn State game. They didn't play well in the first half. Penn State had that within, 3, I think, against Ohio State, and then they opened it up in the second half. That's what good teams do. Shoot, that's what great teams do, and that's what Ohio State is. And so if it is Indiana, who will get at least one shot at the Buckeyes, if not two, because of the Big Ten championship game, it's going to take Indiana's best. And I talked about earlier on my show how injuries are a concern right now for Indiana. These close games are a concern for me right now. But if you play your best, I think Indiana can beat Ohio State on the Hoosiers' best day. But if Ohio State gives you your best, then I don't know. I think they're really, really good, and they're proving it. I'm wondering, though, Spencer, what happens when they get in that tight game? What happens when they get those tough ones down the stretch? Maybe it is the Michigan game. Maybe it is the Big Ten title. Maybe it is the first game of the playoff. What do the Buckeyes do when it's a close game for 4 quarters? Something we'll have to find out sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and Texas gave us a glimpse of that, of course, because that was one of those kind of like Washington, but toned down. It didn't feel as close as it was. For a long time, Texas didn't score in that game. That touchdown came, I think, with 7-ish minutes to go in the fourth quarter. And then you looked up and went, wait a minute, Texas does have a chance, even though it felt like Ohio State was dominating. But what the Buckeyes have done since then, their defense has been great all year. And the coaching job by Ryan Day deserves so much respect because you lose both coordinators and all that production of the NFL, and you're looking like the same team. But the biggest area of growth is Julian Sayin. And this is where I think early in the season, with the way Mendoza was playing, if Indiana and Ohio State had matched up, you would have said, well, at least Indiana's got the quarterback edge because Sayin is young and Nope, Julian Sayin has figured it out. Not a lot of people, I think, are talking about that aspect, or not, at least not enough. It's why I wanted to bring it up on my show today to begin the week of college football content, because Julian Sayin is playing at an insanely high level, but Ohio State hasn't had a big game in a while, so not as many people, I think, are paying attention to it. But he's got Jeremiah Smith, best player in college football, would be, I think, the first pick outside of a quarterback in the NFL draft if he could come out this year, which he can't, which is crazy because he's just one-on-one. But Carnell Tate is your number 2, and you're just sitting there going, well, wait a minute. You were waiting for the quarterback to develop. Now the quarterback has developed in real time like this. It's why I say Hartline has to be a candidate for these jobs because of what he has done this season with Julian Sayin taking over from last year. It's been a remarkable, remarkable job by the Buckeyes.
And look at the comparison between Ohio State and Indiana. You're talking about Fernando Mendoza, who is the betting favorite to win the Heisman Trophy, according to our friends at FanDuel right now, compared to Julian Sayin. Then you look at the 2 receivers. All right, you just talked about Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, great players. Carnell Tate didn't play on Saturday. Weird stuff going on there. But then you compare with Indiana, Elijah Surratt, who also didn't play for Indiana on Saturday, and Omar Cooper, who has maybe the greatest catch in the history of Indiana football and the greatest catch of the season in college. I mean, look at that comparison, dude. And then you start talking about the defensive side of the football. Ohio State just edges out Indiana statistically, but it's so close, man. That's why I want these 2 teams to be healthy, ready to go, and head on against each other. I want the Buckeyes and the Hoosiers to play each other on a neutral site, fully prepared and ready to go, because I think it would be one of the greatest games of this decade.
Yeah, I think that's what's going to happen in Indianapolis. Ohio State just has to get by Michigan. I won't sit here and say that's a given. After what we've seen for the last several seasons, I will sit here and say I'm not picking Ohio State to lose anytime soon. Jacob Goins, Locked On Hoosiers, great as always. We stick with the Big Ten because there's a team that controls their playoff fate. And it's not getting enough buzz either. First, this episode brought to you by Wayfair. The holiday season is right around the corner, and that means it's time to get your home ready. Whether you need more seating for guests, cozy new linens, or fun serveware for holiday hosting, Wayfair's Black Friday sale is here to help you make your space shine. And the best part? You don't have to wait. Wayfair's Black Friday deals are happening all month long with up to 70%, hear me now, 70% off everything from sofas to spatulas. So whatever you're looking to do this holiday season from a hosting standpoint, you can find it over at Wayfair. You've got your furniture, you have got stuff for the kitchen, whatever you need. Wayfair's got it 70% off. You heard me correctly, 70, not 17, 70% sign. That's shift and then the number 5 on the keyboard. Don't miss out on early Black Friday deals. Head to wayfair.com now to shop Wayfair's Black Friday sale for up to 70% off. That's WAYFAIR.com. Sale ends December 7th. If you're not thinking about USC as a team that controls its own destiny to make the college football playoff, you're looking at the college football world wrong. That's just a fact on the ground. Because USC, ho-hum, on a Friday night at home, beat Northwestern 38-17, which was 3 points off. I believe my prediction was 38-20. This was one of those games. We have seen larger point spreads outright lose. You need look no further than Cal as an 18.5-point dog going on the road and beating Louisville over the weekend to derail their playoff hopes. But USC at home, this was a popular cover pick because Northwestern is a physical team. Northwestern plays good defense. Northwestern runs the ball. And I talked going into this game what the game plan would look like. And Northwestern, for a little while, did in fact have that game plan playing itself out. And then USC just put its foot on the gas a little bit. I'm not saying that USC is Ohio State. I'm just saying it felt a little Ohio State game script-ish in that they're just feeling their way out, going back and forth. USC had a really long drive. They weren't creating explosives. Northwestern had a long drive. It was a fast-moving game. And then all of a sudden, USC realizes, okay, we're done playing with our food now. Let's go back to playing the kind of football that we know is required to get us into the playoff. And then USC went and won the game by 21 points. So the Trojans just very quietly they're just puttering along. They're not a speedboat from a narrative standpoint. They're not loud, racing across the lake, making a bunch of noise, catching your attention as they go by. You got a wakeboarder or a skier doing crazy tricks and stuff on the back. No, right now from a resume standpoint, USC is the fishing boat that just trolls by in the morning when the water's nice and calm, and they're just going about their business. You know, you probably didn't watch a lot of their win at Nebraska. That's okay. Nebraska's back in my top 25 this week, which is probably crazy to some people, but it's just slim pickings when you get to who you're going to rank in the top 25. But Nebraska is a game that USC, I think, really needed to have. And when you compare to the team I'm going to talk about next, Washington, I'll tell you why. But they needed to have that game because of what happened last year. Because last year, every time USC went on the road, and earlier this season when they've gone on the road, it's been a struggle. And when they've gone against teams that are trying to be more physical than them, Nebraska, I think, tries to do that. I don't think they're actually very good at it. But Nebraska looked like the more physical team for a while, and then USC figured it out. And so against Northwestern, you saw the same sort of thing. Northwestern will probably be a bowl team. They got 5 wins on the season right now. David Braun's doing a good job. They're not a great team, but they're fine. They're a perfectly fine team. It's a perfectly solid win for USC. Now they play Iowa. Iowa, who just had their heart ripped out of their chest by Oregon last week at the buzzer on their home field. They have to go to Los Angeles. And then USC sets up, if they win that game, a colossal showdown in Eugene against Oregon. College Gameday could, I'll emphasize could, they have already gone to Eugene this year, so they probably won't do a repeat trip. We saw that. This week they're going to Pitt, hosting Notre Dame, even though you've got Texas and Georgia playing this week. Yeah, it's because they've already done the Georgia thing. They've already done the Alabama thing, so they're not doing that game either. But bringing this back to USC, if the Trojans win their next 3 football games, they are in the college football playoff, a place they have never been before. Spencer, they've won national championships. Yeah, I said college football playoff, which has only existed since 2014. USC has never been there. They came close in Lincoln Riley's first year, but here's an opportunity. Are they going to execute it? They can't lose. I don't think 9-3 USC is getting into the playoff. Their schedule is good. It's not a gauntlet. It doesn't have the sort of weight behind it that is probably required for a 9-3 team to get into the playoff, which to this point hasn't happened. We also only have the 1 year of data on that front. So for USC to be in this opportunity, to have this opportunity and be in this position where they've put themselves, despite the struggles they've had this year, losing to Illinois on the road, losing to Notre Dame, who's a really good team. I'm not going to say this is all you can ask for as a USC fan, but you have to at least be able to acknowledge, hey, this is where we're supposed to be at the very least. Now, a lot of Trojan fans understandably see this as the baseline level of success of, hey, we have to at least be in the running. Well, you're at least in the running. And sometimes all you can ask for is a shot. You have a shot. If you beat Iowa, we'll see if they remain ranked. They're in my top 25. I don't know if the committee will see them that way. But if you beat Iowa and then you win at Oregon, who's in everybody's top 10, and then beat UCLA last week of the regular season, who were the only best bet I didn't get this past week, then USC's in the playoff. Full stop. Full stop. So just be aware. Just be aware that that's the case, and USC quietly playing some pretty good football. So, wanted to point that out. Next thing to point out at the other end of the spectrum is Washington, who will not be in the college football playoff. And they were starting to get some dark horse chatter because if they controlled what they needed to before the Oregon game, that could have very well been a rivalry matchup in Seattle for a college football playoff spot. And instead, Jedd Fisch continued to show that he's distracted interviewing for the Florida job? Maybe. Distracted interviewing for the UCLA job? Maybe. I don't think that's the most likely explanation. Washington, inexplicably for the last couple of years. I'm not sitting here telling you that it's easy to go on the road or that there aren't going to be home road splits. Washington is a historically bad team on the road. Maybe historically is too grandiose a term. I don't know how else you describe a team that has lost once at home since Jedd Fisch got there and has won one time on the road in a game earlier this year against Maryland, who we know isn't very good. They trailed 20-0. That's the one road victory that Jedd Fisch has during his tenure. I mean, in the Big Ten. In the Big Ten, I mean, Washington State earlier this year was, I believe, their first actual road win. But the Huskies go on the road. They're a much better team than Wisconsin. This is a game where if the weather was not what it was, Washington wins the game. I feel very confident about that. I can never prove it because we'll never see it. But Washington just wasn't built or isn't built yet to win that type of football game. Last year, the problem with the Huskies is they were not bad in the trenches. They were a disaster on both sides of the ball up front. They improved, but Saturday showed you there's still room to grow. There is still more work to be done to get Washington back to the level that they expect to be at. Because the worst kept secret about the last time Washington was in the playoff just 2 seasons ago when they won the final year of the Pac-12, they won the Joe Moore Award for the best offensive line in college football. This Washington offensive line is not built in that same regard. They don't have the same high-end talent. They don't have the same sort of depth. Defensively, 10 points or 13 points to Wisconsin, yeah, that should be enough in any sort of game. You contrast it with what Oregon did against Iowa. The Ducks are more well-built up front to go win that game. They went for 260. Over 260, over 7 yards a carry did Oregon at Iowa in horrible conditions. Washington's offense didn't score a single point in the second half. They had several miscues. That's what can happen in that sort of environment, but that's what this came down to for Washington. So on my fan mood assessment here, after a particular game, Washington gets the worst of vibes this week because there was a real chance if you beat 3 teams who you're significantly better than, you went into that rivalry game playing for a spot in the college football playoff. Instead, the best thing Washington can have this year, it's a step forward. if Jedd Fisch remains the head coach going forward, it's still an overall good season to realize there are more positives than negatives. But from now on, the best thing that can happen for Washington is probably retaining your head coach, number one, or maybe that's even secondary in the eyes of some Washington fans, to beating Oregon and trying to play spoiler for their playoff hopes. That's where things sit. Washington had a chance and blew it. So the Big Ten will get 4 teams into the college football playoff if USC wins out, I think. The most likely number is looking like 3. 3 is looking like it'll be the number for the Big Ten because Washington gave away a golden opportunity. They just let it slip right away, in a manner of speaking, literally, because it was very wet, hard to hold on to the ball, and they couldn't throw it consistently. I don't know where Jonah Coleman went, got off to the hot start, and Washington just wasn't able to lean on their ground game the same way that Oregon was. And that was a difference. That was a difference over the weekend. So, what a win for Wisconsin. After Luke Fickell announces that he's staying there, I mean, holy smokes. I never thought I'd say it or see it or even ponder it, but Wisconsin should have the highest of vibes as a fan base after that win because your coach, who many, myself included, have doubted or said should be moved on from, goes out and finds a way to beat a ranked team. You got a field storming for everybody that was at Camp Randall, braving the elements, which mostly just includes having to watch that Wisconsin football team, and Wisconsin finds a way to get it done. Couldn't believe it. Could not believe it. But Jedd Fisch, away from Seattle, just hasn't been the same guy. Husky Stadium's a great place to play, but man, if Jedd Fisch gets another job, that is a narrative you will hear pop up because I will bring it up, that he has not been able to get his team to play well on the road. 2 road wins in the last couple of years and 1 loss at home. It's pretty crazy. It is absolutely crazy. What else is crazy is what I accidentally started the other day. First, this episode brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there is no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. So, the best bets that were way under 500 for me here on Locked On College Football, with all lines, of course, provided by our friends at FanDuel, have all of a sudden, after a red blistering hot, I almost didn't include the pick that wound up getting me over 500 for now. Can I build on it? We shall see, because I use FanDuel every week to get all the information that I need. And you can use FanDuel to make college football, the greatest sport in the world, even greater. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So I didn't mean to start a bit of a firestorm, but I did last week because Tulane went on the road and beat Memphis. And when they did that, I made a post on Twitter from @LockedOn_CFB saying what a win for Tulane. They are now in my top 25 for this week. They have returned, and they're the Group of 5 playoff favorite. And this set everybody off. I mean, it was about a 2-day-long run of mentions of people coming at me going, what are you talking about? Does South Florida not exist? Okay. Let me spell all of this out. First of all, just because I'm saying, in my view, based on my rankings and perception of the schedule, that a team is the Group of 5 playoff favorite, does not mean either of these next 2 things. Number 1, that the committee agrees with me, or number 2, that other teams are incapable of becoming the Group of 5 playoff bid. Neither of those things are true. So we'll see what happens on Tuesday. But here's something to consider with regards to the committee. In their first playoff rankings last week, they did not rank a Group of 5 team. But what we learned is that the highest ranked Group of 5 team was Memphis. So Tulane goes to Memphis and wins. And the question for the committee when evaluating these resumes going forward, and maybe it'll all shake itself out. Maybe there will be an upset that'll prevent us from having to go into the wild tiebreakers in the American, which, by the way, directly reflect what happens in the College Football Playoff Committee's rankings. Because if there's no head-to-head between two teams, Tulane and South Florida have not played this year and do not play this year, the next tiebreaker is which team, if any, is ranked higher in the CFP committee's rankings. So if I'm correct, if I were the committee and I have South Florida in my top 25, I have Tulane in my top 25, South Florida is just on the outside looking in, they'd be in the quote-unquote receiving votes category for me, then what you would have is Tulane going to the American Championship game, and then South Florida has no shot to get in. So the reason that I have Tulane over South Florida in my top 25 is for a couple of reasons. Number one, they just beat Memphis on the road, and South Florida lost to Memphis. It was a close game, and I understand South Florida beat UTSA, who housed Tulane. And South Florida beat that. That is all good and fine. What I'm telling you is that based on how the committee has acted and ranked teams in recent years and this season, they are going to reward the quality wins more than they are going to punish bad losses. So losing by the margin in which they did on the road to UTSA is a knock against Tulane 100%. 100%. Alabama lost to a one-win Florida State team in conference play, who didn't win their first ACC matchup until a couple of weeks ago. And based on mine and the committee's rankings, they are essentially getting a mulligan for it because they have so many quality wins. The Florida State loss is being forgiven. So I believe that's how the committee is going to view it. That's how I view it as well. So I reward Tulane. This stuff is very close. I'm not sitting here telling you it is the Grand Canyon gap between these two resumes, but I am rewarding Tulane with my rankings for their quality wins more than I am punishing them for the UTSA loss, which was indeed really bad. Now, South Florida, and this is another thing that comes into play. And again, it's all kind of on the margins. I add it up in my head and go, yeah, I'm going with Tulane here. South Florida and Tulane have something in common. They have played what I have as a top 15 team. For South Florida, that's a top 15 team in Miami. And for Tulane, that's a top 10 team in Ole Miss. They both got housed by almost the same score. 49-12, Miami beat South Florida, and 45-10, Ole Miss beat Tulane. If you want to look at those games, the way that FCS rankings treat FBS losses, which is I'll reward you if you win, but I won't punish you if you lose because you're supposed to lose, I don't really object to that. So if you want to just you can throw you can throw both out, or you can throw neither out and assess them for what they are, which is Ole Miss is a better loss than Miami. But if you want to throw both of them out, that is perfectly fine. So let's just say that we're going to go down that particular avenue, which is more what I lean towards. That you play a team that has got a lot more money and a much better roster than you get blown out, things can snowball. Okay, so that happened to both of them. So we throw that out. South Florida's remaining resume of quality wins is Boise State, Florida, and North Texas, with a loss to Memphis. There's not a bad loss, but those are the 4 games that count. To me, that is not as impressive of a lineup of wins as Tulane having beaten Northwestern by 20, beating Duke, who I know lost this past week. Their loss, I guess Kentucky's a better loss, but Duke at least was competitive against UConn in a game that I expected to be close, and Duke just wasn't able to pull it out. But Duke still has a path, mind you, to go to the ACC championship game. That's incredibly realistic. Florida does not, and Florida got housed by Kentucky over the weekend, 38-7. So if you want to throw the Duke loss thing in there, okay, that's fine. But then you have to knock the Florida win down a lot for South Florida because Florida was never actually a good team. They were in the AP Top 25, and I can show you the tweet when that AP Top 25 came out. I said, who are the most overrated teams and why is it Michigan and Florida? And Michigan was overrated. I didn't have a problem with them being in the top 25. But Florida's a team I've been down on from the year. I never thought they were good. They are not good because they had a head coach who had no business being the head coach at the University of Florida. The North Texas win is good, but the Memphis win, to me, carries more weight between these two resumes because Memphis has the head-to-head win over South Florida. Now, is this close? Yes. These are two of the top group of 5 teams. The AP poll, inexplicably, has James Madison in the top 25. I'm not on board with that whatsoever. I am not at all. And I think James Madison could find a way to get in the playoff. I wouldn't put him outside the top 5, but here are their wins. Okay? This doesn't match up to Tulane, and it does not match up to South Florida either. Weber State, Liberty, Georgia Southern, Georgia State, Louisiana, Old Dominion, Texas State, and Marshall. Have they looked impressive in these games? For the most part, yes. They lost to Louisville 28-14 on the road. It's not a horrible loss. It's not a terrible outcome. But to have James Madison ranked over South Florida and Tulane and reward them for having a better record with an easier schedule when South Florida and Tulane have legitimate quality wins over Power 4 or Power 4 caliber competition, I'm not on board with that whatsoever. So I think Tulane, if they win out and the tiebreakers go, we'll see what the committee does because that'll affect the tiebreakers because the G5 team has to be the conference champion, of course. Tulane has Florida Atlantic at home this week. They go at Temple and then play Charlotte. And then potentially someone in the American Championship game. South Florida, conversely, goes at Navy this week that just got their doors blown out by Notre Dame last week, whatever that expression means. They go at UAB that pulled an upset of Memphis earlier this year with an interim head coach, and then they play Rice, who's just okay. Not great, not terrible. They're just okay. What I would love to settle this is for these two teams to wind up playing in the American Championship game. Because that's how you would, I think, truly settle it. And after San Diego State got obliterated by Hawaii, 38-6 was the final score. After that happened, in my mind, even though they've got the win over Cal, I don't think San Diego State's resume can climb over one of these two. But hey, this is college football. This is college football. Anything could happen. That South Florida Navy game this week is massive because if the Bulls lose, then this conversation becomes moot. That's why I'm having it on my Monday show. But the top teams in the American right now who have one loss that can still go on to the American Championship game. Those teams are Navy, South Florida, Tulane, and North Texas. I'm not going to overlook North Texas. I think they're in the fold, but North Texas does not have a win. Like their best win is Washington State. South Florida beat them by 27. They beat Navy as well. That's a pretty good win. But I don't think that North Texas's resume is as good as South Florida or Tulane's. I think Tulane is first. I think South Florida is second. And then we can have a debate about who's third and beyond. But that started a firestorm over the weekend. And so I wanted to come on here and explain. And also, far be it from me to forget to inform you, the college football public, that a group of 5 team will indeed be in the playoff. That is my thinking. If you don't agree with it, you know what? We'll just see what the committee thinks come Tuesday. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. And until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.